The machines were still beeping. Soft, steady, merciless. Beep, beep, beep. It was 2:14 in the morning. The recovery room at St. Mary's Memorial was dark except for the cold blue glow of the monitors and the faint green line tracing my daughter's heartbeat across the screen. I sat hunched forward in that hard plastic chair, my rough farmer's hands wrapped gently around Lyra's small fingers. She was 9 years old, just 9, and tonight she lay there asleep after surgery, her left arm now heavy in fresh white plaster from the break she got when the AT-5 flipped on the back pasture. I hadn't left her side, not for a second. My phone rested heavy on my thigh. It vibrated once, then again. I didn't want to look, but I did. The screen lit up, cutting through the dim room like a blade of ice. Harlow's message appeared first, bright and sharp. "We're canceling your Father's Day gift. You don't deserve it since you missed Caspian's rodeo. Family priorities." A second bubble popped up right underneath. Marin added only one cold line. "You always choose the wrong thing to put first." I stared at those words until the letters started to swim. My thumb hovered over the screen. I could feel my heart hammering in my chest, louder than the monitors. For a moment, I wanted to type everything. Every year I had fixed their equipment for free. Every time I had lent them my best tractor when theirs broke down. Every dollar I had quietly covered so their farm kept running. But I didn't type a single word. Not one. Instead, I slowly turned my head and looked at Lyra. Her breathing was calm now, the pain meds doing their job. A tiny plastic bracelet with her name was still taped around her wrist. Her hair stuck to her forehead in sweaty strands from the fever that had come with the injury. She had been so excited that morning, riding the ATV with me like she always did, laughing when the wind caught her ponytail. Then one wrong turn on the uneven ground. The machine rolled, her scream, the sickening crack of bone, and while I was holding her in the ambulance, while the doctors were rushing her into surgery, my own family was at the rodeo cheering for Caspian. I slid my free hand into the pocket of my old denim jacket. My fingers closed around the heavy ring of keys. Tractor keys, truck keys, shed keys. Metal worn smooth from 10 long years of use. And 10 long years of handing them over without question. I squeezed them until the edges bit into my palm. The pain felt good, real, because in that quiet hospital room, with only the machines keeping me company, something deep inside me finally broke, and then quietly, dangerously, began to rebuild itself. I wasn't angry in the loud way. No shouting. No tears yet. Just a heavy, sinking weight that had been growing for years. And tonight it finally settled into something cold and clear. This wasn't about missing a rodeo. This was about every single time they had taken from me, and never once asked how my daughter was doing. This story is about a father who spent a decade being the backbone of a family that only saw him as a tool. It's about the exact moment he decided the giving was over. And it's about what happens when a man stops lending his strength to people who punish him for protecting his own child. Because that night, while the heart monitor kept its steady rhythm and my little girl slept through her pain, I made a silent promise right there in the dark. They would never use me again. Not my machines, not my time, not my love. I slipped the keys back into my pocket, leaned forward, and rested my forehead gently against Lyra's small hand. The machines kept beeping, but something inside me had gone completely still. And for the first time in years, it felt like the beginning of strength. The machines had finally gone quiet. 2 weeks had passed since that night in the hospital. Lyra was still there, healing slowly in her room on the 3rd floor, her small body fighting through the pain and the medicines. Celine stayed by her side every day, reading stories in that soft voice of hers, brushing Lyra's hair, making sure the nurses knew exactly what my daughter needed. I drove back to the farm alone each evening after visiting hours. The old pickup rattled down the familiar dirt road as the sun dipped behind the silos. When I reached the equipment shed, I killed the engine and just sat there for a long moment, hands still gripping the wheel. The air smelled of diesel, grease, and dry Kansas earth. I stepped out and unlocked the heavy sliding door. Inside, row after row of steel waited in the shadows. My tractors, my trucks, my milking machines. Every single one of them had someone else's name written on them in invisible ink. I walked slowly between the machines, running my calloused fingers along the cold metal hoods. Each one carried memories I didn't want anymore. There was the big John Deere that Harlow and Ronan had used for 3 seasons straight, the flatbed truck Cole borrowed whenever he needed to haul hay but never wanted to maintain, the expensive milking system I had helped finance so their dairy operation could grow faster. I once believed that if I kept giving, if I kept fixing and lending without asking for anything back, it would keep the family close. That one quiet thought floated through my mind and then disappeared like smoke. Now, every time I opened these doors, the truth hit harder. I wasn't their brother. I wasn't even their friend anymore. I was the moving piece of steel they all depended on. My phone buzzed in my back pocket again. I didn't need to look to know who it was. Another message from Harlow. We need the big tractor by Friday. Season's starting and ours is still down. You know we're counting on you. Ronan followed right after. Don't make this weird, man. Caspian's got games coming up. We can't be stuck without transport. Even Cole sent one, casual as ever. Hey buddy, any chance I can swing by and grab the baler? Promise I'll bring it back in one piece this time. I stood there in the dim shed, staring at the glowing screen, feeling something heavy settle deeper into my chest. Not rage exactly, something quieter, something that had been building for 10 long years and was finally pressing against my ribs, making it hard to breathe. I thought about Lyra lying in that hospital bed with her arm in plaster, about the way she had whispered, "Daddy, it hurts," right before they wheeled her into surgery, about how no one in my family had asked once how she was doing, not a single call, not a single message. They only wanted the machines. I closed my eyes for a second and let the silence of the shed wrap around me. The smell of oil and old metal filled my lungs. These weren't just tools, they were years of my life. Nights I stayed up welding parts back together. Weekends I skipped with Lyra so I could drive 2 counties over to fix someone else's breakdown. All so they could keep living comfortably while treating my daughter like she was optional. The weight of it pressed down on me until my shoulders ached. I wasn't their backup plan anymore. I wasn't the guy who always said yes. My fingers tightened around the phone until the edges dug into my palm. This story is about the slow, painful awakening of a man who finally sees how much of himself he has given away, and how little was ever given back. It's about the moment the borrowed steel starts feeling like chains. Because every text that came in those 2 weeks, every casual demand for my equipment while my daughter recovered alone in her hospital room, only made one thing clearer. The giving had to stop. I slipped the phone back into my pocket without answering a single message. The shed door creaked as I pulled it shut behind me and locked it with a heavy click. Outside, the Kansas wind moved through the tall grass like a whisper. I stood there for a long time, looking toward the main house, then back at the silent row of machines that had carried everyone else's dreams for a decade. Something was shifting inside me, quiet, inevitable, and I knew, deep in my bones, that the night I finally changed every lock was coming soon. The night Lyra came home, the air felt heavier than usual. We drove back from the hospital in silence, just the 2 of us and Celine in the front seat. Lyra slept most of the way, her head resting against the window, the cast on her arm glowing faintly under passing streetlights. When we finally pulled into the driveway, the old farmhouse looked the same as always, but everything inside me had changed. After tucking Lyra into bed and making sure her pain medicine was within reach, I stepped outside alone. The moon hung low and bright over the fields. I walked slowly toward the old red tractor that had been sitting idle for years, climbed up into the cabin, and closed the door behind me with a soft metallic click. There, surrounded by worn leather and the faint smell of diesel and dust, I sat in the dark. No shouting, no angry messages, no long explanations. I simply pulled out my phone and started making the calls. First to Cole. My voice was quiet, steady, almost too calm even to my own ears. "Cole, I'm taking everything back. All the equipment. You have 7 days." He started to laugh at first, thinking it was a joke. When he realized I wasn't laughing, the line went silent for a long second. I could hear the hesitation in his breathing before he finally spoke, but I didn't wait for the argument. I hung up. Next was Ronan. "Ronan, the machines are no longer available. I expect every piece returned within a week. And the loans, we'll settle those too." His voice rose immediately, sharp with disbelief and anger. I listened to him for maybe 10 seconds, then ended the call without raising my own voice. I even wrote a short handwritten letter to Wilder and Marin. My hand shook slightly as I sealed the envelope under the dim cabin light. Simple words, clear boundaries, no room for negotiation. Then I stepped down from the tractor and walked to the equipment shed. One by one, I changed every lock. The sound of the new deadbolts clicking into place echoed in the quiet night like small gunshots. Each turn of the key felt heavier than the last. I moved from tractor to truck to the big milking system, replacing every padlock with fresh, shiny steel that no one else had the key for. In the dim moonlight, I also pulled out the old lease papers for the South Pasture, the land I had co-signed years ago to help Harlow expand. I had already called the county office earlier that day. The contract was now in my name only. Every action was deliberate, every movement slow. My heart pounded hard against my ribs, but my hands stayed steady. This wasn't rage. This was something deeper, a quiet, terrifying resolve that had been growing since that night in the hospital, when I held Lyra's hand while the machines beeped. I was no longer the man who stayed silent and kept giving. I was becoming the father who would protect what was his. Celine appeared at the edge of the shed, her silhouette soft against the moonlight. She didn't speak. She didn't try to stop me or comfort me with words. She simply walked over and placed her warm hand gently on my shoulder, letting it rest there. That small touch said everything I needed to hear. A few minutes later, headlights cut across the yard. Mrs. Ellis's old blue pickup rolled up slowly. She stepped out carrying a cloth-wrapped loaf of fresh-baked bread, still warm. The smell of it drifted through the cool night air. She looked at the new locks, then at me, her eyes kind but knowing. "Mau mu humphila jasit dax," she said softly. "Sometimes the strongest thing a man can do is stop letting others tie him down with them." I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. The lump in my throat felt too big. She didn't stay long, just handed me the bread, squeezed my arm once, and drove away into the darkness. I stood there alone again, the new keys heavy in my pocket, the old ones now useless on the ground beside me. For the first time in 10 years, the weight on my chest felt lighter, not gone, but shifting. This story is about the exact night a quiet man stopped being everyone's convenience and started becoming his daughter's shield. It's about the terrifying, liberating moment when love for your child becomes stronger than fear of losing your family. Because in that moonlit shed, surrounded by cold steel and years of unspoken resentment, I finally understood something I should have seen long ago. I didn't have to keep carrying them. And from tonight forward, I wouldn't. The tractor cabin door creaked as I climbed back in one last time, sitting there under the stars, breathing slow and deep. Tomorrow the real storm would come, but tonight the locks were changed, and so was I. The morning the engine stayed silent was louder than any scream. Sunlight spilled across the fields like it always did, but something was missing. The usual low rumble of tractors starting up at dawn, the distant clatter of trucks hauling milk down the gravel road. None of it came. Instead, an unnatural quiet hung over Harlow and Ronan's place just a mile away. I could feel it, even from my own porch. Inside my house, Lyra sat at the kitchen table eating cereal with her good hand, her cast resting carefully on a pillow. Celine poured her a glass of orange juice and gave me a small, knowing look across the room. Then the phone started ringing. It didn't stop. Harlow's name flashed on the screen again and again. I let it go to voicemail the first few times. When I finally answered, her voice cracked with panic and fury. "Dax, what the hell did you do? The big tractor won't start. None of them will. Caspian can't even get to school. You're ruining everything." In the background, I could hear a child crying. Caspian, his sobs sharp and confused. Before I could say anything, tires crunched hard on my driveway. Ronan's truck slammed to a stop. He jumped out, face flushed red, jaw tight with rage. Behind him, Wilder and Marin's car pulled up right after, dust still swirling in the air. They marched toward my porch like a small army. I stepped outside and stood at the top of the steps, my boots planted firm on the old wooden boards. Lyra slipped out behind me and wrapped her small arms tightly around my waist from the back, pressing her face into my shirt. I could feel her trembling slightly. Ronan stopped at the bottom of the stairs, pointing a finger up at me. "This is insane, Dax. You changed the locks? You're holding our equipment hostage over some stupid rodeo? Give the keys back. Now." Wilder crossed his arms, his voice low and disappointed, the same tone he used when I was a boy. "Stop this childish game, son. You're hurting the whole family." Marin shook her head, eyes flashing with disbelief. "We raised you better than this. You're punishing everyone because you missed one event. Bring the machines back. This isn't you." I looked at each of them slowly. The morning sun warmed my face, but my chest felt cold and steady. No shaking hands, no raised voice. Just the heavy, quiet weight of 10 years finally balanced on the right side. I placed one hand gently over Lyra's small fingers where they clutched my shirt and spoke only one sentence, clear and calm. "I've lent you everything for 10 years. Now I'm taking back what belongs to my daughter." The words hung in the air between us. Ronan opened his mouth to argue, but before he could, another truck rolled up. Cole's. He stepped out slowly, hands raised like he was approaching a wounded animal. His usual easy smile was gone, replaced by something closer to fear mixed with old friendship. "Come on, man," he said softly, almost pleading. "We've been through everything together. Don't do this. I'll bring the bailer back today, I swear. Just don't cut us off like this." I looked at Cole for a long moment. Memories flickered. Late nights fixing engines side by side, shared beers after long harvests. But those memories no longer outweighed the silence when Lyra needed them most. I shook my head once. Slow. Final. "No more, Cole." Across the fence, Mrs. Ellis stood quietly on her side of the property line, arms folded, watching everything unfold. Her eyes met mine for just a second. Later that afternoon, she would pull me aside and say gently, "I've never seen anyone pay such a high price for selfishness. Until today." The shouting continued for a while longer, Harlow calling again, Ronan pacing, Marin listing everything I supposedly owed them. But their voices started to sound farther away, like echoes bouncing off a wall I had finally built. Lyra's grip on me never loosened. She stayed pressed against my back, silent but steady, as if she understood more than any of them ever would. This story is about the terrifying morning when the people who had taken everything for granted suddenly faced the silence they created, and the quiet strength of a father who finally chose to protect his own. It's about watching your family panic when the convenience they counted on disappears, while you stand still for the first time in years. Because as they stood there demanding I return what was never truly theirs, I felt something shift deep inside. I wasn't their machine anymore. I was in control. And for the first time, the silence around me didn't feel empty. It felt like peace beginning to grow. The trucks stayed parked uselessly in their yard that whole day. Engines silent, just like the promises they had broken for so long. 2 weeks later, the silence had become something beautiful. The equipment was gone, returned or reclaimed. The loans were being paid back in small, reluctant pieces. For the first time in many years, my days were no longer measured by how much I could give away. That Saturday afternoon, I set up a small grill behind the house. The smell of charcoal and simple burgers drifted through the warm Kansas air. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was ours. Lyra moved around the yard with lighter steps now. Her cast was still on, but the shadows under her eyes had faded. She laughed more easily, helping Celine string up a few old lights between the trees. Their voices mixed together, soft and warm, like music I hadn't heard in a long time. Mrs. Ellis arrived carrying a big bowl of her homemade salad, the kind with fresh tomatoes from her garden. She set it on the table and gave me a quiet nod, the kind that said she had seen the whole storm and was proud of how I stood through it. Dr. Harlan stopped by for a short visit. He checked Lyra's arm gently, then looked at me with a small smile. "She's healing faster than I expected," he said. "Less stress does wonders for a child." I didn't say much, just thanked him and watched as he patted Lyra's head before leaving. Later, while the burgers were sizzling, my phone buzzed once in my pocket. It was a message from Caspian, a single text sent from a new number. "Hey, Uncle Dax, I miss you. I'm sorry about the rodeo. Hope Lyra is okay." I read it twice. My thumb hovered over the reply button for a long moment. Memories flooded in. The sound of his laughter when he was smaller, riding on my tractor with Lyra, back when things were simpler. But those memories no longer hurt the way they used to. I didn't reply right away. I simply saved the message and slipped the phone back into my pocket. Some bridges take time, and some may never be crossed again. As the sun began to dip lower, painting the fields in soft gold, I carried out the old wooden bench I had built myself over the last few quiet evenings. 3 chairs around the small plastic table. I sat down in one. Celine took the seat beside me. Lyra climbed into the third, her legs swinging happily as she held a half-eaten burger with her good hand. One chair remained empty. It sat there in the warm evening light, simple and quiet, waiting. I looked at that empty chair for a long time. It wasn't a wound anymore. It was space. Space for anyone who truly wanted to be here, not for what I could give them, but for who we were. Lyra suddenly jumped up and ran across the grass, her laughter ringing out as she chased a butterfly under the string lights. Celine smiled and reached over, resting her hand on mine. For the first time in years, my chest felt light. No buzzing phone demanding tractors, no guilt pressing down on my shoulders. Just the sound of my daughter's joy and the warm breeze moving through the trees. This story is about the healing that comes when a father finally draws a line and discovers that real love sometimes means saying no. It's about learning that blood does not give anyone permission to treat your child as less important, and that choosing your own family is not selfish. It is the strongest, most honest act of love you can offer your child. I leaned back on the bench, watching Lyra play in the golden light. The empty chair stayed beside us. It would always be there, ready for anyone willing to respect the boundaries I had finally learned to protect. And as the sun slowly set behind the silos, casting long, peaceful shadows across the yard, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. I felt enough, just as I was, just as we were. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West. Stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blazed the trail. Subscribe, share. Leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you. Aviso legal. /disclaimer. These stories are crafted purely for entertainment and may contain imaginative additions or dramatic interpretations inspired by old frontier eras. We use AI-based resources, voice, imagery, and drafting as part of our creative process. But every final detail is carefully reviewed and shaped by human effort to preserve emotional depth and authenticity. We strictly follow YouTube's rules regarding AI-generated content and refrain from deepfakes, altered identities, or misleading representations. All images, sounds, and related materials are lawfully obtained. Please do not reuse, modify, or distribute any portion of this content without written permission. Thank you for valuing creativity, respect, and original work.